Patriots Nation, there's a lot to unpack right now. And if you've been keeping an eye on the latest projections, you already know things are starting to take shape in a very interesting way. A new mock draft just dropped, and it brings a clear direction that's been gaining traction lately. It's not just about picking talent anymore. It's about building something sustainable around the most important piece this franchise has right now, and that's the quarterback. Everything seems to be pointing toward one central idea, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. There's been a growing conversation ever since the recent visits and off-season moves started to settle in. The focus has shifted heavily toward the offensive line, and more specifically, what the future looks like at tackle. You look at the current situation, you look at the age factor, durability concerns, and the long-term plan, and suddenly it makes a lot of sense why so many projections are leaning in that direction. Protecting your quarterback isn't just a priority. It's the foundation of everything you want to build offensively. And when you combine that with the effort to strengthen the run game, it becomes even clearer why this approach is being seriously considered. Now, the big question that fans keep asking is whether that's the right move, especially when there are other needs on the roster that feel just as urgent. And honestly, it's a fair concern. There's been a lot of emphasis on the need for more pressure off the edge, and that hasn't changed. If anything, it's one of the most obvious gaps on this team right now. But here's where things get interesting, because this draft class offers a unique advantage at that exact position. When you take a step back and look at the depth available among edge rushers this year, it starts to shift the strategy a bit. This isn't a class where you absolutely have to grab one in the first round or risk missing out. There's talent spread throughout, and that opens the door for a different kind of approach. It gives the Patriots flexibility, and that's something every front office values on draft night. You don't want to be locked into one path if the board starts to fall in unexpected ways. So imagine this scenario. You go into the first round, and instead of forcing a pick based purely on need, you take a player who strengthens your offensive line, not just for the present, but for the future as well. Someone who might not even need to start immediately if everything goes right, but who gives you stability and insurance moving forward. That's not a flashy move, but it's the kind of decision that can pay off in a big way over time. And then you come back in the second round, and suddenly, one of those edge rushers is still sitting there. A player who brings size, power, and the kind of presence off the edge that this defense has been missing. That's where things start to feel like they're falling into place. You're not sacrificing one need to address another. You're finding a way to balance both. And if the board cooperates, that's when you can really walk away from those first two rounds feeling like you've made a significant impact on both sides of the ball. There's also something to be said about how unpredictable the draft can be. Rankings, projections, all of it can shift in an instant once teams start making their moves. Every organization has its own board, its own evaluations, and its own priorities. So while certain players might be expected to go earlier, there's always that possibility that someone slips. And when that happens, the teams that are prepared to adapt are the ones that benefit the most. Looking at the offensive tackle position specifically, there are prospects who bring a combination of size, experience, and athleticism that's hard to ignore. Players who have handled high-level competition, who have shown durability over multiple seasons, and who have the physical tools to translate to the next level. That kind of profile is exactly what teams look for when they're trying to build a reliable line. It's not just about talent. It's about consistency and the ability to hold up over time. At the same time, the edge rusher conversation doesn't lose any of its importance. If anything, it becomes even more intriguing when you realize how many options could still be available beyond the first round. There are players in this class who bring explosive pass rushing ability, who can disrupt plays and create pressure in ways that change the dynamic of a defense. And when you find that kind of production outside of the first round, it feels like a major win. What makes this whole situation even more compelling is how it reflects a broader philosophy. It's not about chasing headlines or making the most obvious pick. It's about understanding the bigger picture. It's about recognizing where the value is, where the depth is, and how to maximize both. That's the kind of approach that can reshape a roster over time, especially when you're working with multiple picks and the flexibility to move around if needed. And as you continue to go deeper into the draft, there's another layer to consider. Positions like tight end, for example, where production doesn't always tell the full story. Sometimes the most valuable players aren't the ones with the biggest numbers, but the ones with the tools and versatility to develop into something more. That's where scouting and coaching come into play, identifying those hidden pieces and turning them into contributors down the line. So when you look at this overall projection, it's not just about individual picks, it's about how they connect. It's about building a structure where each addition supports the next, where the offense gets the protection it needs, the defense gains the pressure it's been lacking, and the depth across the roster continues to grow. And the more you break it down, the more you start to see how a plan like this could actually come together if things fall the right way on draft night. And when you carry that mindset into the later rounds, that's where things can really start to get exciting, because this is where smart teams separate themselves from the rest. It's easy to focus on the first couple of picks, those headline moves that everyone debates and analyzes, but building a complete roster goes far beyond that. It's about finding value in places where others might not be looking as closely. And that's exactly where this next part of the projection starts to stand out. One of the most intriguing elements here is the idea of targeting a tight end who hasn't necessarily put up eye-popping numbers, but brings a skill set that fits perfectly into what this offense is trying to become. When you look at how tight ends are used across the league right now, versatility is everything. It's not just about catching passes anymore. It's about being able to line up in different spots, contribute in the run game, and create mismatches depending on the situation. And that's where a player like this begins to make a lot of sense. There's a tendency to get caught up in production when evaluating prospects, especially at positions where stats are easy to measure. But the reality is, not every system allows players to showcase everything they can do. Sometimes it's about role, sometimes it's about opportunity, and sometimes it's just about being surrounded by other talent that spreads the ball around. So when you see a tight end with limited receptions, it doesn't automatically mean limited ability. In many cases, it means there's still a lot left to unlock. And that's exactly the kind of situation where development becomes key. Bringing in a player who already shows strong fundamentals as a blocker immediately gives you something to work with. It allows him to contribute early, even if the receiving side of his game is still evolving. And as he grows more comfortable, as he refines his route running and builds chemistry within the offense, that's when you can start to see a more complete player emerge. It's a long-term investment, but one that can pay off in a big way if handled correctly. What also stands out is how this type of addition complements everything else we've been talking about. If the offensive line gets stronger, the run game becomes more effective. If the run game improves, the tight end position naturally becomes more involved, both as a blocker and as a play-action threat. It all connects, and that's what makes this approach feel so cohesive. You're not just adding pieces, you're building an identity. And let's not overlook the impact that coaching can have in a situation like this. When you have a system that knows how to utilize tight ends in multiple ways, it creates opportunities for players to develop beyond their initial expectations. We've seen it before, where guys come into the league without much hype and gradually turn into reliable contributors because they're put in the right positions to succeed. That's the kind of environment that can accelerate growth and turn potential into production. At the same time, there's still that underlying theme of flexibility that runs through this entire draft strategy. Nothing is set in stone, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Depending on how the board falls, there could be opportunities to move up, move down, or even double down on certain positions if the value is too good to pass up. Having multiple picks gives you that freedom, and it allows you to react instead of forcing decisions. And that's something that often gets overlooked in these discussions. It's easy to say a team should target a specific position in a specific round, but the reality is far more dynamic. Draft night is unpredictable, and the teams that succeed are the ones that stay adaptable. They recognize when a player they didn't expect is still available, and they're willing to pivot if it means getting better overall value. That's where strong draft classes are built. Another layer to this is the balance between immediate impact and future potential. Not every pick needs to come in and start right away. In fact, some of the most important additions are the ones who develop over time, who learn behind veterans, and who are ready to step in when their moment comes. That's how you create depth, and depth is what carries teams through long seasons. So when you step back and look at this full picture, it's not just about filling holes. It's about setting up a structure that can grow and evolve. You're addressing key areas like protection and pass rush, while also adding pieces that enhance the overall versatility of the offense. You're thinking about the present, but you're also planning for what this team can become over the next few seasons. And the more you connect all these elements, the more it feels like a strategy that isn't just reactive, but intentional. Every move has a purpose. Every pick adds another layer. And the end result is a roster that's more balanced, more flexible, and better equipped to handle whatever challenges come its way as the season unfolds. And when you continue to project how this could unfold during the season, it becomes even more interesting to imagine how these pieces start interacting on the field. A stronger offensive line doesn't just protect the quarterback, it changes the entire rhythm of the offense. Plays take a little longer to develop, receivers get more time to separate, and suddenly the playbook opens up in ways that simply weren't possible before. That kind of shift can elevate not just one player, but the entire unit. At the same time, adding pressure off the edge brings a completely different energy to the defensive side. When you have a pass rusher who can consistently disrupt the pocket, it forces opposing quarterbacks into quicker decisions, and that often leads to mistakes. It creates opportunities for turnovers, it helps the secondary, and it sets the tone for how aggressive your defense can be. That's the kind of impact that doesn't always show up fully on the stat sheet, but you feel it every single game. There's also a psychological element to all of this that can't be ignored. When a team invests in protection and physicality up front, it sends a message about identity. It tells everyone, from the locker room to the opposing sideline, that this is a team that wants to control the game at the line of scrimmage. And once that mindset takes hold, it starts to influence how players approach every snap, every drive, every situation. Another factor to consider is how competition within the roster starts to increase. Bringing in new talent at key positions naturally raises the level of urgency for everyone already there. Veterans have to stay sharp, younger players have to develop faster, and that internal competition often leads to better overall performance. It's one of those ripple effects that comes from drafting well, and it can make a significant difference over the course of a long season. And then there's the adaptability factor once the games actually begin. Injuries happen, roles shift, and having players who can step in without a major drop-off becomes incredibly valuable. That's where depth really proves its worth. A backup tackle who was drafted with the future in mind might suddenly become essential. A developing tight end might take on a bigger role than expected. These scenarios are part of every season, and the teams that prepare for them are the ones that stay competitive. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Patriots Hub and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest updates on our New England Patriots. And don't be shy, share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Whispers are growing louder across locker rooms and front offices, and the tone is no longer admiration, it's concern. Around the NFL, a narrative is beginning to take shape, one that paints the New England Patriots under Mike Vrabel as something far more imposing than just another contender. Some are already calling it an empire, others, more dramatically, the empire of evil. League insiders, speaking off the record, suggest that what Vrabel is building goes beyond scheme and discipline. It's a return to something more primal, a bruising, suffocating brand of football that many believed had faded in the modern era. Opponents reportedly feel it before they even step onto the field. The relentless physicality, the psychological grind, the sense that every inch must be fought for. There are murmurs that rival teams are quietly lobbying for stricter officiating emphasis, particularly around contact at the line of scrimmage and defensive aggression. No formal complaints have surfaced, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Executives are said to be reviewing game tape, not just for strategy, but for survival. What unsettles the rest of the league isn't just the wins, it's how they're achieved. Vrabel's Patriots are rumored to thrive in chaos, dictating tempo through controlled violence and forcing opponents into uncomfortable, unfamiliar territory. Analysts have begun to speculate whether this is the start of a philosophical shift or a one-team anomaly that others simply aren't equipped to handle. Inside the Patriots building, the message appears simple: outwork, outlast, outmuscle. Outside, however, the perception is evolving into something far more ominous. The idea that the league must unite against a single team, even informally, speaks volumes. Of course, in a league built on parity, such dominance, real or perceived, rarely goes unchallenged. But for now, the whispers persist. And as they spread, so does a quiet question echoing through the NFL. Has Vrabel built a powerhouse, or something the rest of the league fears it can't control? That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our New England Patriots, be sure to subscribe to Patriots Hub and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.